If you think you know what a mother's love looks like, wait until you see what this elephant did when her baby stopped breathing. The distress calls started before dawn. Deep, guttural sounds that rolled across the Amboseli Reserve like thunder trapped beneath the earth. James had been a wildlife ranger for 17 years, and he'd never heard anything quite like this. It wasn't the territorial trumpet of a bull elephant or the warning cry of a matriarch sensing danger. This was desperation given voice. He was already moving before his mind fully processed what he was hearing. His boots hit the floor, hands fumbling for his radio in the pre-dawn darkness. Static crackled through the radio as other rangers reported in from positions scattered across the vast preserve. North sector, near the dried riverbed, someone said, their voice tight. Multiple distress calls, continuous for the last 10 minutes. I'm closest, James said. I'm heading there now. He didn't wait for authorization. Something in those calls told him that every second mattered. He grabbed his emergency kit and ran for his vehicle. The engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the darkness as he tore down the dirt track winding through acacia trees and tall grass still wet with dew. The sky was turning from black to deep purple, that strange hour when day and night existed in the same space. His headlights caught the reflection of eyes in the darkness, a herd of impala scattering at his approach. But James barely registered them. His entire focus was on those calls, growing louder now, more urgent. When he rounded the bend where the riverbed cut through the landscape, he saw her. A female elephant stood in the middle of a clearing, her massive form silhouetted against the lightening sky. Even from a distance, James could see that something was profoundly wrong. Her body was trembling. Elephants were calm, deliberate creatures most of the time. They moved with purpose, with the confidence of animals who knew they were among the largest on Earth. But this elephant was shaking. Her enormous body trembled with each cry she released, her trunk moving in frantic, repetitive patterns over something on the ground. Something small. Something that wasn't moving. James cut the engine and stepped out slowly, his heart pounding against his ribs. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant rain. He moved carefully, keeping his body language non-threatening. He'd worked with elephants long enough to know that approaching a distressed mother was one of the most dangerous things you could do in the wild. But as he got closer, as his eyes adjusted to the growing light, he realized she wasn't even aware of his presence. Her entire world had collapsed into a single point of focus, the calf lying motionless in the red dirt at her feet. The baby elephant was tiny, impossibly small compared to its mother. Its skin still had that wrinkled, not quite fitted look of the very newly born. Its eyes were closed, its miniature trunk curled against its body. From 20 feet away, James couldn't tell if it was breathing. The mother made another sound, and this time it broke something inside James's chest. It was a cry of such pure anguish that it transcended species. It was the sound of a parent watching their child slip away, powerless to stop it. He lifted his radio with hands that weren't quite steady. I need veterinary backup at the North Riverbed coordinates. Now, we have a newborn calf, status unknown. Mother is extremely distressed. Copy that, came the response. Dr. Kendi is 30 minutes out. Can you assess the situation? 30 minutes. James looked at the calf again, straining to see any sign of life. And then, as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, he saw it. The faintest rise and fall of the calf's chest. So slight he almost missed it. So fragile it could stop at any moment. The calf is alive, he said into the radio, his voice rough. Barely, tell Dr. Kendi to hurry. He took another step closer, and this time the mother noticed him. Her head swung toward him, ears spreading wide. But she didn't charge, didn't trumpet a warning. Instead, her trunk reached toward him slightly, then back to her baby, then toward him again. The gesture was so human it made his throat tight. She was asking for help. A wild elephant, a creature that had probably never had positive contact with a human being, was asking him for help. James had seen a lot in his years as a ranger. He'd witnessed the brutal efficiency of lion hunts, the slow death of animals in drought, the casual violence that was part of survival in the wild. He'd learned to maintain professional distance, to remember that nature operated on its own terms, that intervention was rarely the answer. But standing there, watching this mother elephant plead with her eyes for something, anything to save her baby, all of his training felt like words in a book written by people who'd never stood in this exact spot. He moved closer, slowly telegraphing every movement. The mother watched him but didn't move to stop him. When he was close enough to see the calf clearly, his stomach dropped. The baby's abdomen was distended, swollen in a way that screamed of internal problems. Its breathing was rapid and shallow, its small chest heaving with the effort. Mucus bubbled from its trunk with each exhale. "Hold on," James whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the calf or to himself. "Just hold on a little longer." The mother made a low rumbling sound, softer than her earlier cries. This was intimate, a lullaby sung in the face of death. A promise that she wouldn't leave, wouldn't give up, wouldn't let her baby face this alone. James pulled out his emergency medical kit, knowing even as he did that there was little he could do. He had bandages, antiseptic, equipment designed for basic first aid. Nothing that could help with whatever was happening inside this calf's body. But he had to do something. Had to try. He knelt in the dirt next to the calf, hyper-aware of the mother's presence looming above him. One swipe of her trunk could send him flying. One step of her massive foot could end him. But she stood perfectly still, watching, waiting, trusting in a way that wild animals simply didn't trust humans. The calf's skin was hot to the touch, burning with fever. James pulled out his radio again. "Dr. Kendi, what's your ETA?" "The calf is in bad shape. Fever, distended abdomen, labored breathing." "I don't know how much time we have." Static, then her voice tight with urgency. 20 minutes. I'm driving as fast as I can." "James, don't try to move it. Don't give it anything. Just keep it calm and wait for me." 20 minutes. James settled into the dirt, his hand resting lightly on the calf's shoulder, feeling each struggling breath. The mother stood over them both, her shadow protecting them from the rising sun. And together, the three of them waited as precious minutes ticked away. The savanna came alive around them. Birds began their morning songs. Distant herds moved toward water sources. But in their small clearing, time seemed suspended. There was only the labored breathing of the calf, the anxious rumbling of the mother, and the desperate hope that help would arrive in time. James found himself talking to the calf, his voice low and steady. "You're going to make it. Your mom hasn't given up on you, which means we don't give up either. Help is coming. Just a little longer." The calf's eye rolled toward him, and for just a second seemed to focus. Such a small moment. Such a fragile connection, but it was enough to keep James's hope alive. The mother's trunk reached down, touching her baby with infinite gentleness. Then she did something that James would never forget. She reached out and touched him too. Just a brief contact on his shoulder, her trunk tip soft against his skin. It lasted maybe 2 seconds, but in that moment James felt something shift. A bridge forming between species, between different kinds of consciousness, different kinds of love. She was thanking him, or maybe asking him to not give up. Or maybe just acknowledging that they were in this together now, human and elephant, both fighting for the same impossibly small life. In the distance, James heard an engine. Dr. Kendi's vehicle appeared on the horizon, dust billowing behind it. Relief flooded through him so intensely it made him dizzy. "She's here," he told the mother elephant, though he knew she couldn't understand his words. "Help is here." The vehicle skidded to a stop and Dr. Kendi emerged with 2 assistants and what looked like half a mobile veterinary clinic. She took one look at the scene and her professional mask slipped for just a second, revealing the fear beneath. But then it was back, and she was moving with swift efficiency. "Easy, Mama," Dr. Kendi said softly, approaching with her hands visible. "I'm here to help." "I promise you, I'm here to help." The mother watched her approach, ears forward, every muscle tensed. But she didn't charge. It was as if she understood on some fundamental level that this human was her baby's last chance. Dr. Kendi dropped to her knees beside the calf, her hands already moving in examination. Her face grew tight as she palpated the swollen abdomen, listened to the labored breathing. James watched her expression change, saw the moment she understood how bad it really was. "Intestinal obstruction," she said quietly. The calf ingested something during birth, probably part of the amniotic sac. It's blocking the digestive tract. The pressure is building up, compressing the lungs and heart. If we don't relieve it soon, She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Her assistants were already preparing equipment, a stomach tube, syringes filled with medications. Dr. Kendi's hands moved with practiced precision, but James could see the fear in her eyes. "I need you to help stabilize the calf," Dr. Kendi said to James. Keep its head steady while I try to pass this tube. James moved into position, his hands gentle but firm on the calf's small head. The baby's eyes were glazing over, its breathing becoming more erratic. They were running out of time. Dr. Kendi began the procedure, working the tube carefully down the calf's throat. The mother elephant made a low sound, almost a moan, but she didn't interfere. She just watched with eyes that held more intelligence than most humans would ever credit her with. The tube was in. Dr. Kendi attached a large syringe and began trying to draw out fluid to relieve the pressure. James held his breath. Then Dr. Kendi's face changed. I've got something. The obstruction is moving. She worked quickly now, her hands sure despite the pressure. She massaged the calf's abdomen with one hand while manipulating the tube with the other. Sweat dripped down her face despite the cool morning air. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The calf's breathing was getting worse, not better. James could see it happening, could feel the life slipping away beneath his hands. Come on, Dr. Kendi muttered. Come on, you stubborn little thing. Work with me here. And then it happened. The calf coughed. A weak, wet sound that was nevertheless the most beautiful thing James had ever heard. Its body convulsed as whatever had been blocking its system finally shifted, finally released. Another cough, stronger this time. The calf's eyes suddenly focused, blinking against the sunlight. The mother elephant let out a sound that shook the ground. Not a cry of distress this time, but something else entirely. A trumpet of such pure, explosive joy that every bird in the surrounding trees took flight. The calf took a deep, shuddering breath. Then another. Its small trunk wiggled weakly. One leg kicked out. Dr. Kendi sat back on her heels, tears streaming openly down her face. Her assistants were crying too. James felt his own eyes burning. They'd done it. Against odds that should have been insurmountable, they'd pulled this tiny life back from the edge of death. The mother immediately moved forward, her trunk wrapping around her baby, checking it, reassuring herself that it was real, that it was breathing, that death had been cheated. She helped the calf to its feet, supporting its weight, letting it lean against her massive leg. Dr. Kendi stood slowly, her legs shaky. The next 72 hours are critical, she said quietly. The calf needs to nurse, needs to stay hydrated. We need to monitor for infection, for complications. James nodded. They'd won the first battle, but the war for this calf's life was far from over. Dr. Kendi made the call to monitor the calf around the clock. James volunteered to take the first watch, parking his vehicle at a respectful distance while the mother and calf remained in the clearing. Night fell over Amboseli like a curtain dropping. The savanna transformed into a symphony of sounds. Distant hyena calls, the rustle of grass, the occasional roar of a lion far off. James sat in his vehicle, night vision binoculars trained on the elephant pair, a thermos of coffee growing cold in his lap. The mother hadn't let the calf out of her sight. She stood guard with a vigilance that bordered on obsessive, her trunk constantly checking her baby, reassuring herself that it was still breathing, still warm, still there. The calf nursed weakly, its small trunk fumbling as it tried to figure out how its own body worked. Around midnight, James heard movement. His hand went to his radio instinctively, but he paused when he saw what was approaching. 3 more elephants emerged from the tree line. Adult females, part of the mother's herd. They'd come back for her. What happened next made James reach for his camera, his hands trembling. The 3 elephants approached slowly, their trunks extended in greeting. The mother responded with low rumbles, her body language relaxed despite her exhaustion. And then, one by one, the other elephants touched the calf. Gentle, deliberate touches with the tips of their trunks, blessing it, welcoming it, acknowledging its existence. It was a ritual James had read about but never seen. Elephants greeting a new member of the family, confirming the bond that would define the calf's entire life. In the wild, where survival depended on the strength of the herd, this moment was sacred. The matriarch, an old female with broken tusks and scarred hide, spent the longest time with the calf. She ran her trunk over its small body, examining it with the care of an experienced grandmother. Then she turned to the mother and touched her face, a gesture so human in its tenderness that James felt his throat tighten. They stayed for nearly an hour. The 4 adult elephants formed a protective circle around the calf, their bodies creating a fortress against anything that might threaten this fragile new life. When they finally left, melting back into the darkness, the mother seemed different. stronger, as if their presence had recharged something in her that was running dangerously low. James radioed Dr. Kendi. Her voice came back, thick with emotion. "They know," she said simply. "They know what almost happened, and they're making sure she knows she's not alone." Day 2 brought new challenges. The calf was stronger, but still weak. It could stand for longer periods, could walk a few wobbly steps before collapsing. But it wasn't nursing properly. Dr. Kendi arrived at dawn with supplements, a milk formula designed for elephants. The question was how to administer it without causing the mother to panic. James watched as the vet approached on foot, moving with the slow deliberation of someone defusing a bomb. The mother elephant watched her come, ears spread wide, evaluating. Dr. Kendi stopped 20 feet away and waited. Just waited, letting the elephant make the decision. Minutes passed. James barely breathed. Then, incredibly, the mother took a step to the side, giving Dr. Kendi a clear path to the calf. "She's giving permission," James whispered into his radio. "She's actually letting the vet help." Dr. Kendi moved forward, her bottle of formula held out where the elephant could see it. She knelt beside the calf and began to feed it, the artificial nipple awkward at first, but gradually accepted. The calf drank in small sips, its tiny trunk exploring this strange new source of nutrition. The mother watched every second. Her trunk never stopped moving, checking the air, checking her baby, checking the human kneeling so vulnerably beside her most precious possession. Trust was being built in real time, brick by brick. When the feeding was done, Dr. Kendi stood slowly and backed away. The mother immediately moved to her calf, sniffing it thoroughly, making sure it was unharmed. Then she did something that made everyone watching exhale in wonder. She reached out with her trunk and briefly touched Dr. Kendi's shoulder, just once. A fleeting contact that lasted maybe 2 seconds. But in elephant language, it meant everything. Acknowledgement, gratitude, the beginning of understanding. "Did you see that?" Dr. Kendi's voice shook over the radio. Did everyone see that? James had. He'd seen a wild elephant thank a human. He'd seen barriers that shouldn't exist begin to crumble. The rest of the day passed in careful observation. The calf's strength was returning gradually. It could walk now without immediately collapsing, could nurse for longer periods. The swelling in its abdomen was decreasing. Every vital sign pointed toward recovery, though Dr. Kendi cautioned that they weren't out of danger yet. As evening approached, James prepared for another night watch. The sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, casting long shadows across the savanna. The mother and calf stood together in the clearing, silhouetted against the dying light. It was a peaceful scene, almost deceptively so. But James had learned long ago that peace in the wild was always temporary, always conditional. And as darkness fell and the predators began their nightly hunts, he kept his vigil with eyes that never stopped scanning the shadows. On the third day, everything changed. James was on his morning patrol when he noticed the tracks. Large paw prints in the soft earth near the clearing. Lions. A coalition of males, judging by the size and spacing. They'd been close. Too close. His radio crackled to life. "James, we have a situation." It was Marcus, one of the other rangers. Pride of lions moving toward the north sector. "They're hunting." James's blood ran cold. The mother elephant was still weak from 3 days of barely eating, barely sleeping. The calf was getting stronger, but it was still tiny, still vulnerable. They were exactly the kind of target that hungry lions looked for. He floored the accelerator, his vehicle bouncing over rough terrain as he raced toward the clearing. When he arrived, his worst fears were confirmed. The mother elephant was in full defensive mode. She stood between her calf and the tree line, ears spread to make herself look bigger, trunk raised in warning. James could see them now. 4 male lions, their golden bodies low to the ground, moving with the patience of predators who knew time was on their side. They were testing her, circling, looking for an opening. James grabbed his rifle, loaded with rubber bullets designed to scare, not kill. But he knew the rules of non-interference. Nature took its course in the reserve. Rangers only intervened in cases of human-caused danger or extreme circumstances. But as he watched that mother elephant prepare to fight impossible odds to save her baby, rules felt like abstract concepts. The largest lion made a feint, darting forward. The mother elephant charged, her trumpet blast so loud it hurt James's ears even from inside the vehicle. The lion retreated, but not far. They were coordinating now, 2 on one side, two on the other, dividing her attention. The calf huddled behind its mother, its small body trembling. It didn't understand death yet, but it understood fear. James made a decision that could cost him his job. He started the engine and drove directly toward the lions, horn blaring. They scattered, startled by the sudden noise and movement. He positioned the vehicle between them and the elephants, creating a metal barrier. His radio exploded with voices. "James, what are you doing? Stand down." "That's a direct violation." "I don't care," he said quietly. "I'm not watching this happen." For 20 minutes, he played a dangerous game. Every time the lions tried to circle back, he repositioned. He fired rubber bullets into the ground near them, creating sharp cracks that made them flinch. He used every tool at his disposal to make them decide this meal wasn't worth the effort. And finally, reluctantly, they left. Slipping back into the acacia trees, their bodies dissolving into shadows. James sat in his vehicle, hands shaking on the steering wheel. He'd crossed a line. He knew it. The radio was ominously silent now, which meant his superiors were deciding his fate. But when he looked at the mother elephant, still standing guard over her calf, but visibly relieved, he couldn't find it in himself to regret it. She turned to look at him. Their eyes met across the distance. And in that moment, James understood something fundamental about the job he'd chosen. Rules were important. Non-interference was important. But compassion, the kind that bridged species and logic and protocol, was sometimes more important. His radio crackled. The reserve director's voice came through, measured and careful. "James, report back to headquarters." He closed his eyes. "Here it comes. And bring Dr. Kendi. We need to discuss establishing a formal protection protocol for this family unit." "What you just did, it can't be policy." "But it should be." James felt something break loose in his chest. Relief, vindication, hope. That afternoon, the reserve's leadership made an unprecedented decision. The mother and calf would be given a temporary escort. Rangers would maintain a discreet presence, not interfering with natural behavior, but ensuring that predators understood this family was off limits during the calf's most vulnerable weeks. It was controversial. It sparked debates that would echo through conservation circles for months. But it was also the right thing to do. Because sometimes when you witness something fighting that hard to survive, you have to fight alongside it. 2 weeks passed, then 3, then a month. The calf that had been barely breathing in the red dirt was now running. Awkwardly, with the gangly enthusiasm of all young animals, but running, chasing birds, investigating bushes, testing the boundaries of its small world with fearless curiosity. The mother had regained her strength. She'd rejoined her herd, and the calf was now surrounded by aunts and cousins and the complex social network that would teach it how to be an elephant, how to find water in the dry season, how to read the weather, how to survive. James watched from a distance, his binoculars capturing moments that filled his field journal with observations that read more like poetry than science. He'd been checking on them every few days, unable to fully let go even though his official protection duty had ended. Dr. Kendi often joined him. They'd sit in comfortable silence, watching the herd move through their territory with ancient grace. "You know what I can't stop thinking about?" Dr. Kendi said one evening as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange. "That moment when she touched my shoulder. I've worked with elephants for 15 years, and I've never had one do that." James nodded. They remember. Elephants. They have incredible memories. That calf will grow up hearing the story of its birth. The herd will pass it down. How the humans helped when death came too close. Or, James added with a slight smile, how a stubborn ranger broke protocol to scare off some lions. They both laughed, but it was tinged with something deeper. They'd been changed by this experience, fundamentally altered in ways they were still discovering. One morning, about 6 weeks after that first desperate dawn, James arrived at the clearing to find something unexpected. The entire herd was there. All 14 members, from the ancient matriarch to the youngest calves. They stood in a loose circle, and in the center stood the mother and her baby. The calf was nursing, strong and healthy now, and as James watched, the herd began to rumble. A low, synchronized sound that started deep in their chests and rolled out across the savanna like distant thunder. He'd heard of this but never witnessed it. An elephant celebration. A communal acknowledgement of something important. They were celebrating life. The life that had almost ended before it began. The life that stubbornness and love and the little human intervention had managed to save. James felt tears on his face and didn't bother to wipe them away. He radioed Dr. Kendi. "You need to get out here. Right now." When she arrived, the herd was still there, still singing their rumbling song. She stood beside James, and they witnessed together what few humans ever see: pure, unfiltered joy from creatures whose emotional depth rivals our own. The celebration lasted nearly half an hour. When it ended, the herd began to move, heading toward the western water holes. But before they left, the mother elephant turned. She looked directly at James and Dr. Kendi, standing by their vehicle 50 yards away. She raised her trunk high. A salute, a goodbye, an acknowledgement that transcended language and species. Then she turned and followed her family, her healthy calf running alongside her, and they disappeared into the golden grass. James and Dr. Kendi stood in silence for a long time. There were no words adequate for what they'd just experienced. Finally, Dr. Kendi spoke. "People are going to ask if this was worth it. If we should have let nature take its course." James thought about that first morning. The mother's desperate eyes. The calf's failing breath. The choice he'd made to care instead of merely observe. "Nature took its course," he said quietly. "It's in our nature to help, to care, to fight for things that matter. That's just as natural as anything else in this world." 6 months later, James received a video from a tourist who'd been visiting Amboseli. They'd captured footage of the herd, and there, in the middle of the group, was a young elephant calf. Bigger now, but unmistakable. The distinctive marking on its ear, the way it walked with a slight swagger, the mother who never let it stray too far. The calf was thriving, living the life it had almost been denied. James saved the video on his phone. On hard days, when the job felt impossible and the weight of all the animals he couldn't save pressed down on his shoulders, he'd watch it. He'd remind himself that sometimes, just sometimes, love wins. He thought about that morning often. How close they'd come to losing something irreplaceable. How a mother's refusal to accept defeat had inspired an entire reserve to break its own rules in service of something greater. The debates about intervention versus non-interference continued in academic circles. James stayed out of them. He didn't need to defend what he'd done. He'd looked into a mother's eyes and seen a question. He'd answered it the only way his conscience would allow. The story of the calf's rescue had spread beyond the reserve. Visitors came hoping to catch a glimpse of the elephant that had survived the impossible. Documentary filmmakers requested access. Conservation organizations used the story to illustrate the complex ethics of modern wildlife management. But for James, it was never about the publicity or the debates. It was about that moment when a wild creature had looked at him and asked for help. When the boundary between observer and participant had dissolved. When compassion had proven stronger than protocol. Dr. Kendi had published a paper about the case, documenting the medical intervention and the subsequent monitoring. Her research had already influenced protocols at other reserves, creating frameworks for when and how to intervene in wildlife emergencies. The Amboseli incident, as it came to be known, had become a case study in adaptive conservation management. 1 year after the rescue, James stood in the same clearing where it had all happened. The rainy season had come and gone, transforming the landscape. The grass was green and lush. Water flowed in the riverbed that had been dry that morning. Everything had changed, and yet everything was the same. He heard them before he saw them. The low rumble of elephant communication, the crack of branches as large bodies moved through vegetation. And then they appeared, the herd, moving through their territory with the timeless grace that had captivated him since his first day as a ranger. The mother was there, and beside her walked a calf that was no longer tiny. It was strong and healthy, playing with other young elephants, learning the social dynamics that would govern its entire life. As the herd passed, the mother paused. She turned toward where James stood by his vehicle. For a long moment they looked at each other, and James wondered if she remembered. If somewhere in that vast, complex elephant memory, she held the image of that desperate morning, the humans who had helped, the second chance her baby had been given. The mother raised her trunk in what might have been acknowledgement, or might have been coincidence. Then she turned and continued on her way, her calf running to catch up. James watched them go, and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe. Or understanding. Or simply the knowledge that he had done the right thing when it mattered most. That night, as he wrote in his journal, he tried to capture what the experience had taught him. about the artificial boundaries humans drew between themselves and nature, about the capacity for connection that existed between species, about the courage it took to care in a world that often rewarded detachment. But words felt inadequate. How do you describe the look in a mother's eyes when she's watching her child die? How do you explain the sensation of feeling an elephant's gratitude through the briefest touch of a trunk? How do you convey the sound of an entire herd celebrating life? In the end, he wrote simply, "Today I saw the elephant and her calf. They're doing well." She seemed to remember. "I know I'll never forget. The calf is 2 years old now. It runs with the herd, learning to be an elephant from aunts and cousins and the ancient matriarch who has survived 50 years in the wild. It plays in mud wallows and tests its strength against trees. It's learning to read the weather in the behavior of insects, to find water during the dry season, to navigate the complex social structures of elephant society. Sometimes tourists capture it on camera, not knowing they're photographing an animal that shouldn't exist. An elephant that was saved by a mother who refused to give up and humans who chose compassion over protocol." James still works at Amboseli. He still patrols the same routes, still responds to the same kinds of emergencies. But something changed in him that morning. He sees the animals differently now. Not as subjects to be observed from a distance, but as individuals with their own stories, their own struggles, their own fierce will to survive. The reserve established new guidelines after the incident. Not a blanket policy of intervention, but a framework for making decisions based on circumstances. When human activity has endangered an animal, when a situation is clearly reversible with minimal intervention, when the ethical cost of inaction outweighs the principle of non-interference. It's not perfect. Every case is still debated, still agonized over. But it's better than rigid rules that don't account for the messy reality of life and death in the wild. Dr. Kendi continues her work, now with a reputation that extends far beyond Amboseli. She's consulted on wildlife emergencies across Africa, bringing the lessons learned from one desperate morning to help other animals in crisis. She still thinks about that moment when the mother elephant touched her shoulder. Still feels the weight of that trust. The mother elephant and her calf are spotted regularly by rangers and tourists. They're healthy, thriving members of their herd. The calf has learned to use its trunk with precision to communicate in the complex rumbles and trumpets of elephant language. It's growing into an elephant that will someday have calves of its own, passing on the genes that made it a fighter from its very first breath. And somewhere in the elephant's vast memory, James believes is the story of that morning. The day it almost died. The day its mother refused to accept that fate. The day strange creatures with gentle hands and mysterious tools pulled it back from the edge. Elephants pass down their stories through generations. Matriarchs teach the young about danger and safety, about where to find water and how to mourn the dead. And just maybe they also tell stories about the time humans helped instead of hurt. About bridges built between species. About hope in the face of impossible odds. That night, the elephant didn't just save her baby's life. She reminded everyone watching that the fiercest force in nature isn't predators or drought or fire. It's a mother who refuses to let go. And sometimes, if we're paying attention, if we're brave enough to act when it matters, that kind of love teaches us how to be better humans. The last reports show the calf running through tall grass with cousins, playing games that elephants have played for millions of years, free, alive. A living testament to what's possible when we choose compassion over protocol. And somewhere in the Amboseli Reserve, a mother elephant remembers the day humans helped save her world. She'd tell that story to her grandchildren someday, in rumbles and touches in the complex language of her kind. A story about the day love refused to surrender and won.